I hereby call this meeting of Norwood City Council to order. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. This evening, we don't have anyone to do the invocation, so we'll have 60 seconds of reflection. Thank you. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce.
Here.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here.
All members present. Next, we have amendment of agenda. This evening, we have 3 items to add. Under minutes of previous meeting, we have the February 28th minutes to add to the agenda. Under reports of standing committees of council, we'll have the Finance Committee report this evening. And under introductory reading of ordinance and resolutions, we will have the financial recovery plan added as M2. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Move to amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer. Mr. Braden?
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item F, minutes for February 28th and for March 14th, 2023 regular meeting. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the minutes as of read.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. Both sets. Mr. Thompson, for both dates?
Both sets, yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item G, special presentations. This evening, we have Mr. Steve Anderson with Sorta Metro for a presentation. Welcome, sir. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Norwood. Thank you for the invite, Mayor Schneider. It's great to be back in Norwood. If you all recall, I was here probably about 3 months ago. Wasn't daylight savings time then, but we were reporting on the BRT, and this is a follow-up to that. The too long didn't read version is, Norwood is still a strategic partner for Metro. You guys are still on a main corridor, Montgomery Avenue, that we're still looking at very strongly for enhancements. It didn't make the cut with the bus rapid transit for, the first cut, but the second cut, phase 2, we are looking at Montgomery, and we are still looking at Glenway. So this is me. This is reinventing Metro. These are the kind of the bullet points we live by. I won't belabor the point here, other than to say we fancy ourselves as an economic development company that just happens to run 40,000-pound buses. Now, I know that for many, many years, Metro has been in a bit of a death spiral where we cut service, we lose ridership, we cut service, we lose ridership, and on and on and on. But thanks to Issue 7, we're able to actually invest in Metro. Thank you all for your support of Issue 7. And the result is I'm here. Y'all got me out of South Florida in the lovely weather. It'd be like 85 right now. But I'm here, and we've got a team behind us. We have funds to invest from everything from bus stops to bus shelters to the bigger ticket projects like bus rapid transit. So we know we have a long ways to go in terms of winning back our market share. We know a lot of folks that would never ride transit and don't see the value or it doesn't work for them. But there are folks that you rely on that rely on our service, as well as there's folks that may be not aware that, you know, you have two 24-hour services, Route 4 and Route 51, right outside of this very building. So the way we reestablish that trust and the bond with the community is by offering frequent service that has amenities, waiting areas that are comfortable and informative, as well as span service that run first shift, second shift, third shift, as well as a travel time. We know folks aren't going to choose us if it takes 3 to 4 times as long on a bus or a transit vehicle than your personal car. It's just geometry. We're not going to be it for everyone. But some folks we may be an option for. Phase 1, again, 24-hour service. We're the only second community in the state of Ohio, Cleveland being the first that has 24/7 routes. You have Route 51, that's your Norwood crosstown, goes out to Hyde Park, Oakley, all the way over to the west side, Glenway Transit Center, as well as Route 4, which goes up to Kenwood Mall and UC Blue Ash. Those are 24 hours. They run on Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Kwanzaa, you name it. But did you know that we also added 2 crosstown routes, the Route 37 and the Route 65 last year, as well as increased frequency on some of our main corridors? That was year 1. Year 2, just this last December, we extended Route 43, that's our most popular route on Reading Road. That goes all the way up to Sharonville now. Route 17, more frequency out to the Seven Hills housing area out by the interstate, as well as new Route 5, new Route 67, and Route 4 Kenwood has better frequency on the weekends. So we're not done yet, and we would be able to do a lot more if it wasn't for the labor market. It's extremely competitive right now, and that unfortunately extends to trying to hire bus drivers. As one applicant told me, boxes don't talk. So we're competing with the Amazons of the world and trucking and what have you. It's a people business, it's high touch, and you're dealing with folks from all across the spectrum. So we'll continue to recruit and retain, but if you know anybody that is interested, and we will pay you to train for your CDL, please reach out to metrocareers.com, and we would love to have more bus drivers. So I'm getting towards the meat of really what we're here for is really to connect folks to higher paying jobs. We don't believe folks need to have 3 and 4 cars in the driveway. Even just selling 1 car, not having 1 car payment can really improve the quality of life for folks in our neighborhoods. So this is what we were able to do with those last 2 service changes. 45,000 additional folks that were transit dependent now have access, as well as 20,000 more higher paying jobs. These are jobs 50,000 and up are now accessible by the local bus system. So we'll keep pushing that. Reinventing Metro has been a success so far. We're in year 2. Ridership is back up to about 90% of pre-pandemic. We're top 10 in the nation in terms of that ridership return. Now the flip side of that is, you know, we're not in New York, we're not in Chicago. We weren't pulling 10 million a day before COVID. I mean, the baseline was pretty low, but we're going to continue to not only meet, but exceed that. And one of the ways we'll do that is the Metro Now. That's the transit Uber system that we're rolling out in Sharonville and Northgate areas. That's coming in May. That's a $2 ride in a shared van that works somewhat like an Uber. You hail it on your app. You can also call for folks that don't have a smartphone. In addition, we're putting out new bus stops. There's new bus shelters and new bus benches all across our service area. I would love to engage with whoever the permitting person is here in this city. That is my pet project, is getting better benches and shelters out of the bus stops. But then not to hold all that up, to really talk about bus rapid transit and what we think will be great for Norwood, which is our enhanced corridor service. So BRT, this is the same slide I showed you all out here in the winter. It's nothing new. Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Louisville, all these places have those. But this will be our first attempt here in Cincinnati. We all know the BRT is fast. The R stands for rapid. These are some of the improvements that you can expect to see in about 5 years on the Reading and Hamilton corridors. Those were the two corridors that got selected for Phase 1. It's not to say Glenway and Montgomery would not, get that infrastructure investment at a later date. But right now, we've gone with what scored the highest in our analysis. So BRT, again, it's a bus that acts like a train. This is a picture of Indianapolis. You have stations that are spaced out a mile to 2 miles. It's a lot more expensive to operate. 2 lines are going to cost almost $400 million. We're looking for federal assistance for that as well as some local funds. In addition, we're looking at a 5-year program. In the meantime, between time, we're looking at Montgomery Road. How do we best serve the needs of this area, this corridor? We know we have all different type of income levels as well as different age. We have pockets of under 18 population. You have folks that are relying on paratransit, your elderly, your zero-car households, as well as multilingual folks that are on this corridor. How can we serve this corridor better? So you'll see downtown is at the bottom, Kenwood Mall is at the top, and here you are right here in the middle. Norwood is a major trip generator. You have major bus stops right out here at this Kroger, as well as on both sides of the street, a block or two up and down from that area. What does that area look like? Can we do some things, whether it's solar bus stop lighting or better shelters, better benches? We want to partner with the city of Norwood. You folks have been trusting your transit service needs to us for a very long time, and we want to recoup that. So this is what the corridor that we're looking at. What kind of things would Norwood like to see in the corridor? These are some examples of things that are better than what's out there currently. We have bus shelters out there now, but are they lit? Is the sidewalk being power cleaned in that area? Those kind of things. Are there enough benches? It drives me crazy sometimes. You drive next to a bus stop that has a bench, but the 3 people are standing around the bench. Like, why don't we sit in the bench? And we understand that's because people have their spacing needs. So you actually need to provide more seating because folks aren't going to sit just right up really close to each other in most instances. People have that personal space rule. These are just images of things that we think can make transit better, make transit more reliable. Again, it starts with us being able to show up when the schedule says we're on time, make sure our drivers are courteous, safe, and efficient, all of that stuff. But we're looking to do something here in Montgomery in the next year or so before the BRT comes out. So we would love your feedback. These are some more pictures of you've got the seats to the top right that are actually on the bus stop pole where you don't have enough room to fit a bench or a shelter. You have the solar bus stop light in the bottom right corner that runs on solar. That can be a major safety improvement for folks that may be concerned or have had a negative experience on our system. So just trying to, again, reinvest in our transit system. It's been underfunded for so very long, but those times are over with. So the bus rapid transit implementation, this is for Reading and Hamilton. You all will still see a benefit from that. The major benefit being that from uptown to downtown, you'll have service every 5 minutes that will basically come up Main Street, go through Vine Street, up to the college, and then split off. Reading will go east on Reading via MLK. Hamilton corridor will go off to the left, and I have a picture of that here. So the blue is the BRT Phase 1. The pink, the magenta are the other 2, and we're looking to do enhanced service there. 15-minute service, 15-minute frequency, better bus stops, even maybe some transit signal priority. And with that, I would take all questions, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Frenza?
And this is maybe more for the city of Cincinnati, but one thing that I know some folks that use transit have issues with is the lack of bathroom access at a lot of these places where they have to wait sometimes for quite a while for transfers. And I know it would not be feasible to do it at every station, but is that something that SORTA or the city has looked at, having more public bathroom access at some of the larger transfer stops?
That's historically in transit something that they've been a little reluctant to try to get into the bathroom management game. I will say that we do want to work with our businesses to kind of partner with them. You know, some businesses, your Dunkin' Donuts, you know, if you buy a cup of coffee, they'll let you go in the bathroom, that kind of thing. But then our drivers may not always leave the bathroom in the best condition. So I'm always fond of taking like a high-touch approach and actually talking to the mom and pops or the corporate to see unofficially, officially, are we welcome here? And that's got to be a partnership where we're doing the right thing, the business is doing the right thing. So officially, will we be building restrooms on the corridors at transfer areas? It's probably not, because it's a huge liability and maintenance concern in a right-of-way that we don't always control. But I will take that back to my bosses. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
In some transit, I think Portland is doing that, but a little different.
Mrs. Weinbauer.
Yeah, kind of same question that Ms. Franzen had. I know San Francisco, they have, you know, all that there in the restrooms. But if you could take that in, you know, open the discussion. I think there was a few cities I looked at that kind of had a policy where if a business allowed people to come in and use their restrooms, the city or whomever was kind of involved would help fund or, you know, anything like that. But I think that is something really important to use. I worked by the stop at Speedway and had a little girl that came in and had to use the restroom, and, you know, her dad was like, just go behind the fence. Like, no, you can come inside
I love
and
that
use the
idea,
restroom. But it is a concern, you know, with the transit there. So I would love for it to start the conversation however you can. We would enjoy any ideas and support with that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, sir. I have a question. I understand that the stop in front of Kroger's is one of the top most populated or most densely used spots, and the current shelters are a little lackluster. So you mentioned that that was something that you're interested in, and about partnership. What would that potentially look like, especially as we're about to do the whole Montgomery Road corridor revamp?
Right, so we've been pretty aggressive getting federal funding for bus stop improvements. We just, you know, we got good news from Congressman Landsman's office on an earmark for better shelters. So a shelter that, you know, during inclement weather, it looks nice and it actually provides some protection from the elements. However, the design, the way that it looks, the partnership with Norwood and other places, how that kind of works out. It'll take a little more space. We may need your help engaging Kroger with an easement if we can't fit it all in the right of way. And then your usual, you know, who maintains it, who replaces it if it gets ran over, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the partnership. We feel pretty strongly, though, that we can take the lead on the capital part. Yeah.
So what needs to happen in the next 2 years as we're doing our work that those stops look as nice as the rest of Montgomery Road's going to look?
You have a lot of stops on just that Kroger piece. I'm probably going to look at consolidating them into one, with the caveat that do we want folks all in one area? Do we want them spread out? So that's an initial conversation. You're like 3 bus stops right there on the plaza property. I mean, it's probably about 1,000 feet, but those stops are way too close. That means the bus got to stop 3 times.
Right.
We're trying to speed the bus up. But just conversations like that, I think, who is your like transportation or your public works guru that we can start to have those conversations?
Clint.
Yeah.
You said guru, that's Clint.
Okay, I like that.
Clint Zimmerman, he's fantastic. He's the Public Works.
Clint's last.
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman, I will take that
I
back.
can get you guys in touch.
Excellent. All right.
Anyone else?
Anything else?
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Moving on to item I, request to address council. I have several this evening, so when I call your name, please come to the mic. You'll have 5 minutes. State your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes to address council. First name I have here is Chris Hanlon.
Thank you. My name is Chris Hanlon. I live at 4522 Hector Avenue. I'm here to speak in favor of Councilwoman Hoover's efforts to get a historic marker for Marsh Park. I serve on a committee of the Cincinnati Preservation Association that documents sites of Black history. When I watched the video of the last council meeting, I heard persistent and very good questions about, is it really true that Marsh Park was created just to prevent African Americans from owning homes in that area. How well nailed down is that history? So I did, just before the meeting, distribute a little packet just of 4 newspaper articles. The first one is the one titled, Park to be Located in Norwood to Prevent Threatened Formation of Negro Colony. The next to last paragraph says, Council directed that immediate steps be taken to buy the land and evict the present tenants. The tenants they're talking about lived in a 4-family house that was on the Marsh Park site. In addition to the 4-family, there was one family named the Hursts who lived in the 4-family house but had purchased a vacant lot next door to the 4-family. They'd hired an African-American contractor to build a house for them. They'd given the contractor a down payment, but the house was never built. If we go on to the second article, that's titled, Park is Solution of Puzzle, Norwood to Purchase Land on which Negro Colony was said to be growing. And the last paragraph of that one is, the property includes the house in which the Negroes live, and it is understood that there is an agreement among the various property holders in the district that no more property will be sold to Negroes. George and Sarah Hurst, who had bought the vacant lot next door and did not want eminent domain to be used to take their land from them, they did come and speak before Norwood Council. That's the third article, titled, Negro Pleads for Immunity of Her Home. This is about George and Sarah Hurst, and the last paragraph of this one says, when the ordinance was introduced to the council members, the Negro woman whose hair was snowy white walked in front of Mary Nolte and voiced a plea to the council requesting them not to pass an ordinance that would drive her and her husband from their home. But that is sadly what the council did. So I guess the question here is, well, why commemorate that? Right? It's kind of a sad story. Why have a historical marker for that? And I think the reason is that the determination and tenacity that African Americans brought to this place to make Norwood a place that they could call home, that deserves to be honored, that determination and that tenacity. American greatness comes out of the struggle to form a more perfect union, and this is an important part of that struggle. When we lose the sense of struggle, we lose the meaningfulness of the victory that we do have in Norwood becoming a more welcoming community. So I do think that this is an important story, and a story that's very worthy of being told. I do want to tell one other story about Marsh Park. The most important person ever to live in that 4-family house was a woman named Miranda Bolden Parker. She was the widow of a great Underground Railroad hero named John P. Parker. For decades, John P. Parker and his wife Miranda lived in Ripley, Ohio, on the Ohio River. Their home there still exists. It's now a museum. John P. Parker aided at least more than 400 people, fugitives fleeing from slavery, to find their way to freedom. He also owned a foundry in Ripley. He manufactured their farm equipment that he designed himself and patented himself. He was an amazing, amazing person. John P. Parker died in Ripley. He's buried in Ripley. His widow came to Norwood and lived here for more than 7 years and faced serious harassment while she was here. The windows and shutters of her house were repeatedly broken. She and her grown daughters, who were teachers, appealed to the police. The police were unhelpful. Instead, they sent the health inspector around, who said those broken windows are health code violations and we're giving you a 24-hour eviction notice. They tried to stay. They sued the city of Norwood. Eventually, the Parkers did have to leave Norwood and they moved away. But Norwood should be very, very proud to claim Miranda Bolden Parker as a citizen of Norwood. She represents a great American tradition having to do with the Underground Railroad, and that's why I urge your support for this marker. The story of the Parkers is told on the fourth news clipping, in case that helps. We have done our due diligence. I've brought along copies of our statement of significance and other materials that will be submitted with the marker application for anyone who wants a copy. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Our next request to address council, Ashton Tucker.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ashton Tucker. I live at 5630 Homer Avenue. I'm here as a resident, but I'm also here as a member of the DEI Advisory Board. I'm proud of where I live. I'm proud of my home. One thing I think that you can't say is you can't be proud of something that you don't acknowledge the history of. I think that if you willfully ignore the history of what happened in Marsh Park, and that is a hostile takeover of people's land, you are not actually acknowledging what makes this place what it is. Part of it is moving forward, and part of that is looking back at the past and acknowledging things that we've done wrong, things that we should not have done, but how far we've come and how far we might have yet to go. I think having the marker in Marsh Park to acknowledge the people who live there, to acknowledge the harm done, is frankly the least we can do. Acknowledging the harm that was done by Norwood City Council. I would just urge City Council to understand and respect the fact that that is part of our history and that we should be honoring the people who live there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next request to address council is Abigail.
To who? One for everybody.
Hi, my name is Abigail Zhang. I live at 4311 Allison Street. With my family, I'm here to support the Marsh Park Historic Marker that Susan Daniels presented at the last council meeting. Our family works, worships, goes to school, and owns a home in Norwood. Sorry, I really love history. My children have played at Marsh Park for years. I brought a little visual aid. Here's my kids playing at Marsh Park about 5 years ago. One of my greatest hopes for my kids is that they will grow up to be both creative and courageous, to tell the truth even when it hurts, and to practice repenting and repairing when they have done wrong. As we have read from the documents of the time that Mr. Hanlon provided earlier and then also distributed tonight, the creativity of Norwood City Council was what created Marsh Park. And yet it was not creativity united to courage, but instead creativity carried out by people who were afraid and believed a big lie. They believed the lie that Norwood would somehow be better by keeping Black people out. Even the family of the courageous Black Underground Railroad hero, John P. Parker. Speaking the truth is an important and essential part of repairing wrongs. We know this with our kids, with our partners, with our coworkers. It's true as a town also. Installing a marker like this is nowhere near the last step, as the previous speaker said, but it's an important one that creates space for honest healing, growth, and joy. Speaking the truth about the creation of Marsh Park also pushes back against the lie that racial segregation is just the way it is. The documents from the time when the park was created clearly show us that people made choices to exclude, and that means that people like us now can make new choices. We can tell the truth, and we can include everyone in the creation of our town's future. British historian Tony Jett said it very well. The historian's task is not to disrupt for the sake of it, but to tell what is almost always an uncomfortable story and explain why the discomfort is part of the truth we need to live well and live properly. A well-organized society is one in which we know the truth about ourselves collectively, not one in which we tell pleasant lies about ourselves. That's the end of the quote. So communities across the town and the nation are beginning to look more closely at whose stories need to be told in their towns and neighborhoods, and it would be an honor for Norwood, for our community, to join these efforts and to participate in the Ohio Historic Marker Program, which is one of the nation's most active and most respected historic marker programs. So I encourage the council to reject the underhandedly creative acts of the city that removed families from Marsh Park and instead give its unanimous support to this historic marker proposal and full cooperation with what may be a lengthy process at the state level. I look forward to our community being able to hold its head high for telling the truth and continuing the work of repair in the hope of a joyful, creative community that welcomes all. So,
Our next request to address council, Michael Brooks.
Hi, everyone. First, I want to just echo what everyone else said. Everyone's said exactly what I agree with. My name is Michael Brooks. I'm a homeowner here in Norwood. I felt compelled to speak tonight because as a homeowner in Norwood, I live in the same city where George and Sarah Hurst resided. I enjoy a quiet neighborhood and a nice house on Grove Avenue where I can have a future with my wife, a future that was robbed from the Hurst family and other African-American families, a robbery not motivated by money. No one stood to profit off of building a small park. Black families had their home taken from them because white people hated them. It's that simple. White residents hated other residents of Norwood because they were African American. Racism and hate led to families losing their home. Imagine carrying what belongings you could from your house and starting again at this very moment. You probably can't even think of the few items you'd carry. The Hurst family didn't need to imagine. They lived that nightmare. They experienced being forced from their homes with little else besides hope that it will get better for them and their children. At this point in time, more than 100 years later, there's not much more that can be done. All that can be done is remembering the shameful part of history and helping others remember. Remember it so it's not repeated. A plaque sharing this story is one of the best ways to preserve and share this history. The Black families who lived there deserve to have their stories remembered. And I understand that there's some well-deserved skepticism of our news media and that the Cincinnati Enquirer is the main paper that covered this story. However, this almost always is the case of the national media where there's skepticism in national politics. The Cincinnati Enquirer was established in 1841. It's always been a well-respected paper. In fact, in 1912, 4 experts in print media published a college textbook titled Essentials in Journalism, a manual in newspaper making for college classes. This textbook was used as a guide for journalism students all across the country in 1912 at nearly the same time as the Marsh Park incident occurred. And it said, and I quote, in this textbook, it said, "The Enquirer has printed some masterpieces replete with a majesty of diction that is most artistic, but there are few papers that can imitate it successfully. If experts on the media at the time held up the Cincinnati Enquirer," and yes, it is the Cincinnati Enquirer, I made sure it wasn't just the Enquirer. If the experts on the media at the time held up the Enquirer as a news media to admire, there's not much weight to the argument that the Enquirer is not a trustworthy news source about the time. This story is a part of our Norwood history, and I just covered why you should believe it. I previously mentioned there is little that can be done to right this wrong, but just an acknowledgement that it happened is the bare minimum. A simple plaque that reminds everyone to be on the lookout to help others when they are mistreated by individuals or businesses or the government. A plaque that shows people their government is willing to admit to its previous wrongdoing, fostering a positive sense of community. A plaque that helps memorialize this country's progress, and most importantly, the smallest semblance of justice this council can provide for the Hurst family and all Black families forced from their homes, deprived of the future they dreamed of living in Norwood that I'm currently enjoying. Thank you.
Our last request to address council, Logan Merkin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Logan Merka. I'm here as a guest of Norwood, as a Blue Ash resident, but I felt it was important to come and show my support for the movement for the Marsh Park marker. In my opinion, the first step in healing the community is always admitting that there was wrongdoing. Placing a plaque to pay homage to the families that were stolen from is the bare minimum exercise of power the city council can do to begin to remedy the gross misuse of power and funds granted to it by the people of Norwood in 1922. More righteous, in my opinion, would actually be to see the park renamed entirely, but I know that's not on the ballot tonight. To show true respect for the damage inflicted upon those people and the essential eradication of their established lives in Norwood. The people of this country are quick to erect monuments and puff pieces when they paint the perfect story of white knight saviors of humanity, but the reality is that our history is sloppy and imperfect, with just as many instances of harm as help. If we don't pass these lessons on to the future generations, we're doomed to repeat them. And my fear is that those on council who would oppose this measure would prefer that outcome and seek to restore a culture where it is appropriate to plainly print in black and white in your local newspaper that people are banding together to prevent minorities from moving into your area. I hope that council will move to unanimously support and approve this measure so that the Parker family and the Hurst family can be remembered as the heroes and victims that they were. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to item J, reports of standing committees of council. Finance Committee. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, to whom was referred to 2023 Financial Recovery Plan, beg leave to submit the following report. Auditor Jim Stith presented a high-level overview of the FRP to the committee. There are minutes attached to the report here as well. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Eric Thompson, Chairperson, as well as Mr. John Braden and Mrs. Emily Franson.
Mr. Braden.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Motion to receive and file the committee report.
Motion by Mr. Braden to receive and file the committee report. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item K, third reading of ordinances and resolutions. K1, resolution supporting the placement of a historical marker at the entrance of Marsh Park and acknowledgement that the park was established by the city of Norwood in 1923 for the sole purpose of preventing blacks from owning homes there, supporting a request for grant funds for such marker and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Hoover.
I move that we have the final reading, and I would ask for it in full.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to have the third reading.
Yes, thank you, sir.
May I have a second? Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Brady.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So I've got a few comments. I would first ask, can you read, do you have the information on the plaque with you? Can I hear exactly what's going to be on the plaque? Can someone read me what's going to be on the front and the back of the plaque, please? Mr. President, through the president, to whoever that applies.
Mrs. Hoover.
Two things. One, I did send you a Google Drive with that information on it. I'm happy to read you the latest draft. As it was explained, at the last council meeting, the final draft is done in conjunction with the Ohio Historical Society. They read all the information. They make sure that there doesn't need to be any tweaking with what is stated in the marker. But I'm happy to read the latest draft if you would like, but I also did send that to you as well.
Oh, yeah, through the president. I would like to hear exactly what's going to go on the plaque, on the front and the back, exactly what's going to be on that plaque. If we're going to vote on it, I'd like to hear it, please.
Mrs. Hoover.
I can pull it up, but we don't know exactly what will be on it until after the Ohio. What we're voting on tonight is an application.
Well,
I just wanted to be clear.
if I can respond, Mr. President, I'm fine with that. However, I don't know that we should be voting on things that might be. So like if you have something definite that I'd like to see that's going to be displayed for the public, then I think we have a right to know that. So I just was kind of curious on if we have something or if we don't, we're just going to leave it up in the air and put anything on there. I'm just curious.
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, just to explain, this is a vote to submit an application to the Historical Society here in Ohio to try to get them to put a marker on Marsh Park. This is not a vote to install a marker. This is a vote to submit an application. We do have the draft wording of what we would like to see on that marker, but we do not have the final wording because that is actually worked with the State Historical Society to make sure it's fair and accurate.
Thank you.
I would
Mr.
ask.
Thank you. I'd like to hear it.
I would ask that what are you afraid of in displaying this marker?
I'm afraid of nothing. I would like to hear what I would like to hear what a council person would like to display in front of our citizens that we are voting for, that I am voting for my citizens. I'd like to hear what's going to be on that plaque. That's simply, no one's afraid of anything except for a question, what is on the plaque? I don't understand why anybody has to be afraid of anything. What goes on the plaque?
Whose hand is up
I have
first?
it in front of
Mrs.
me.
Hoover?
Again, sorry. I'm happy to read it. Again, it
Thank
was
you.
emailed to you.
Thank you.
On the front side, this is our recommended draft. Marsh Park. This park was established by the city of Norwood in 1923 for the purpose of preventing Black Americans from owning homes here. From 1907 to 1922, a four-family house on this site was rented by Black families. George and Sarah Hurst lived in one of those units. In 1922, the Hurst purchased a vacant lot next door and hired a Black contractor to build them a home. White neighbors, fearing that a, quote, Negro colony might be developing, petitioned Norwood City Council to take action. The council used the right of eminent domain to seize the vacant lot from George and Sarah Hurst. The council also seized several other lots and demolished the four-family dwelling, creating Marsh Park. Underneath that, it would say City of Norwood, Ohio. Under that, Norwood Historical Society. Under that, the Ohio History Connection. On the back of the marker, the Parker family. Miranda Bolden Parker lived in a home on this site from 1907 to 1915. She was the widow of Underground Railroad hero John P. Parker, who had been born into slavery. This family had lived in Ripley, Ohio, where John P. Parker helped more than 400 fugitives to escape from slavery. After his death in 1900, Miranda and their daughters Bianca and Portia, both teachers, came to Norwood. Here they rented an apartment, a four-family dwelling. In 1913 to 14, vandals repeatedly broke the windows of their building. Bianca Parker appealed to the police for help. Instead, the police notified the health department, who gave the Parkers a 24-hour eviction notice. The Parkers sued the city to stop the eviction, but eventually the Parkers moved out of Norwood. Underneath that, City of Norwood, Ohio. Underneath that, Norwood Historical Society. Underneath that, the Ohio History Connection. Again, just for clarity, this is what we are going to recommend. The Ohio History Connection may want to make some minor adjustments to that language.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I respond, please?
Mr. Brady?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. So, thank you, Ms. Hoover. I appreciate that. We're not unanimous today. This reminds me of something that this comes up, that a lie will travel around the world before the truth puts its boots on. And we're also quick to jump on this as truth. I'm wondering how many of those statements that you just read, Ms. Hoover, are facts. So I would say not many, because what we're dealing with is 100-year-old rumor. And it says so in the statement, in every document that I have, it documents a 100-year-old rumor. This is not unity in the community, folks. This is hate. This is not unity. This is... There's no one here from that era to defend themselves. So you can say whatever you want to say, and I guess it's true. I disagree.
It's documented.
And so I find a little selective outrage, because not so long ago, I lived through another eminent domain situation. And it's been so long. I've been here. I was here at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it's not pretty. But we did. It was about 70 homes here in Norwood. We took 70 homes here in Norwood. And I'm just curious, how many of those were Black-owned, and how many of those are we going to erect a plaque for these people that just recently? 70 homes were took in Norwood. And as far as a newspaper article from 100 years ago, I don't believe a word I read in the newspaper today. So then you're going to tell me that this is a credited 100-year-old rumor from a news article. That's what we have here. So I'll close, and you will be able to pass this here today, just knowing we're not unified here. You know, we just came off of an election that was very weak, if I may be blunt. We had a weak election last time. We had some walk-on. We couldn't fill the ticket. There was people walking on here and then there are people here, sitting here that wasn't elected. So we have an election coming up in November, folks, and we have a pretty strong ticket. And I can tell you that using your platform in this way, we're not going to forget this. So you can pass this evening, and everything's going to be fine. But people will not forget what's happening here today. So come November, I think we're going to have a price to pay.
Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is something I've been going through the documents you sent since you kind of sent them and just kind of checking it out. Going in, I wanted to support it heavily, if it's true. But what I've been able to see is just news articles is the only source of documentation of this event. I've not seen anything from the city saying our purpose to take that land was to keep black families out. There is a copy of the ordinance, I noticed it's not in this packet, and it reads the ordinance, and it doesn't say anything in there that the purpose is to keep black families out. So to erect a sign that says that, I think would be kind of a misrepresentation possibly of the goal at the time, because like Mr. Braden mentioned, we weren't there, we don't know. It's really hard for me just to go off old news articles. The law department read this, went through this, it was said. Did you guys, if I could through the chair, to Mr. Gary, did you guys find anything definitively objective from the city saying, yes, this is what we want to do?
Mr. Gary.
Mr. Moore pretty much dealt with this particular issue, and we were not charged to investigate the facts. We were just asked to consider the draft of the resolution.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Mrs. Hoover.
I'm not quite sure where to begin. Mr. Braden, I did send a document with over 100 historical documents. There are newspaper articles. There are also deeds. There's the ordinances. They are all from that time period. I would say that Mr. Moore, I did specifically ask him if this has been vetted by you, and he said, yes, this is absolutely accurate. It also fits with what happened around the country at that time. I would love for us to be able to get the minutes from those meetings. Unfortunately, they are not accessible to us. They're up in the crow's nest covered in bird feces. There is no doubt in my mind, after having read all the research and having talked with other local historians, that this is 100% historically accurate. The reason I ran, one of the main reasons I ran for city council was because of the experiences that I've had in this community. In 1920, there were 95 black people living in Norwood. By the 70s, there were 33. That's not by accident. Norwood was intentionally exclusive. And I would say the documents support that claim. I'm working for a Norwood that is intentionally inclusive. I believe that this marker acknowledges our past. I've also talked about some of the other things we'd like to do in the park, where it's not a bad Norwood, shame on Norwood, but rather, yes, this is a part of history. It's a part of our history. But I don't know how we can claim to be proud of a community when we don't even fully acknowledge our history. And this is 100%. I would also say that if the Historical Society and the Norwood Historical Society and the Ohio History Connection, they have to verify that it's factually accurate. If they, who are they? They are the historians. I'm not a historian. If they say that it is historically accurate, then I would say that they are the experts in it, more so than I would be or you would be.
Thank you, Ms. Silver.
Thank you,
Mrs.
sir.
Franzen, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry, I don't know.
Mr. Kels?
Thank you, Mr. President. Though I will agree that I could see where it could be viewed as historically accurate for the time, or even maybe even be accurate for the history of the time. What I'm not seeing, and I haven't seen in any of these documents, is anything saying that it is, like that's proven that it is. I have a hard time finding that our council 100 years ago would just get rid of all this information that would prove that that was their intention. If they're going out and acting this way and doing that, it's going to be really hard to cover that up thinking, hey, in 100 years, man, people ain't really going to like what we're doing right now, so we need to hush this up. Without that, and I mean, the evidence might be somewhere, I don't know, but right now it's not in front of me. I would love to be proven wrong later down the road. I would absolutely love that. But with that and with what we have, I feel, and it might not be the view of others, but I feel that by doing this would be taking away from, other instances of racism and that throughout just not only Norwood, but the country that are actually proven, documented by legal documents, legal findings that we're not seeing here. So I will be voting yes on the reading, but I will be voting no on the placement of the plaque.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I want to say that I want to respond to that. You said that you haven't seen anything that proves that this actually happened, when in fact, there are over 100 documents. You said you can't hide something like this from happening. You're absolutely right. There are 100 documents still in existence from this time documenting this actually occurring. That is what we like to call proof in a world where you look for things like that. There are lots of things that people aren't around. There's nobody here to talk about what really happened at the Holocaust, yet we know that it happened. We don't need somebody here that was there at that time to vouch for it. It's absolutely ridiculous that we're in a situation where this is being questioned. Now, here's what I think is happening. I think that both of my colleagues don't want this marker up because it talks about a dark part in Norwood's past. And I can understand that. If you came out and said, you know what, yes, this happened, but I think it's divisive, as you said, Mr. Braden, you said it breeds hate.
Thank you.
I don't happen to agree with that, but if that was your point, at least I think it would be honest. But I think what we're doing is trying to cover up a desire to keep a piece of Norwood's history from being well-known or well-represented by saying that we don't actually have proof of that. You're absolutely right. This is going to pass tonight, and then the Ohio Historical Society is going to take a real long, hard look at this. And if, as you suggest, that this did not happen, and this is a rumor, then there won't be a marker. We're not voting to put up a marker right now. We're voting to submit an application so somebody who knows about this stuff can review the information and see if it's accurate. If it is accurate, why would we be afraid to put this marker up?
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So yeah, I respect, Mr. Thompson, I respect your views, and
I know.
you guys get to pass this tonight. And I also want to say that, we're allowed to have opposing views here. This is what democracy looks like. Everyone in this room I consider friends, and so I would like to be able to have opposing views in here and walk out of here and still be friends. So that's one thing. Secondly, but I do have opposing views, and they're not going to be the popular ones, but I'll tell you the truth. So my first problem is that we don't have any proof. We have a news article about a rumor, and we have 99 other documents with this lady's name on it. That's what we have. No proof. We have a news article about a rumor, and then we have 99 documents with the lady's name on it. That's what we have. Secondary, also, I'm glad you mentioned, Susan, you mentioned Ms. Hoover, Councilwoman Hoover. You mentioned that there's something, I personally think that, I think that there's a personal, I don't want to say vendetta, but I think there's something that went on, that there's something driving this, and I think it's within. So there's something driving this, and I think it might be a little personal. So maybe you were wronged by someone, and now you're trying to prove that the entire, town is. So, but I also think it's telling that we just heard from the law department, and they don't have one fact that this is, we just heard from the law department, and granted, he said that he says there wasn't one fact. I just heard that. I heard that. Maybe you guys didn't, but not one fact. So that's also something I heard. I think it's telling that we're dealing with a rumor. We're not dealing with facts. So we're going to pass it, but we'll pass a rumor without facts.
May I
Ms.
respond to
Franzen?
that?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me.
So,
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
No, you're fine. Mr. Gary?
May I respond to this?
Yes, sir.
Again, we were not asked to investigate the facts of this.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Moore, however, reviewed what he was given, and he believes that it's accurate.
Thank you.
I have not, I've read
Can I ask
stuff,
you,
but,
do you believe this?
I frankly haven't studied it carefully enough to.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mrs. Franzen?
Thank you. So for me, when I was first read these articles and then looked into the legal documents, this was 6 months ago at this point, I think, this was not surprising to me at all. And it's not because Norwood is uniquely bad or uniquely good. It was a town just like any other town in the 1920s. There are so many other people, black people, non-white people, that face this type of issue, this discrimination. We have documentation of it. Central Park was partially erected on a community of color. And the reason why there's not an explicit, like, we are doing this because we hate black people, is that they didn't need to say it. That was just how it was in the 1920s for, unfortunately, a decent part of white America. And my thought also is, even barring, let's say, this is all rumor, what reason would they have to declare eminent domain with these houses? What other reason would there be besides that people had issue with something with the houses or with the people inside of them? And context clues saying that there is a Negro colony, context clues being that there used to be black people there, and then there were no black people there, and even fewer black people in Norwood after that. There isn't any logical reason for me that I can understand that they would declare eminent domain, destroy these houses, except if they had issue with the people within them. That's it. And for that reason, and a lot of others, I think that this is a way that we can honor the people who live there and acknowledge that City Council, as a member of that body, it sucks to think that people were so terrible back then, but I would rather acknowledge it than not. That's my feeling. Thank you.
One more thing. One more thing.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Franzen, Councilwoman Franzen, that, I believe you. I believe your intentions are good. But I can give you a reason why this will happen. I can give you a reason. I can give you one valid reason that Norwood is a city within a city. And I'm curious, and this is just me talking to you, and I can give you a reason why I think this happened. You think there was any animosity towards Cincinnati and Norwood as Norwood was forming a city within a city? Do you think Cincinnati wanted that, or do you think they resented that? Do you think that there might have been somebody at this that had some sort of animosity towards Norwood, like I think others may have on this body? I think that's very possible, that Cincinnati, not as a whole, but this person, this guy who wrote this article or gal, probably, in my opinion, had issues with Norwood, and this is a great way to shed a bad light on a place that they didn't want to happen, that we were forming a city within a city, and they probably didn't like that. So that's the way I kind of see it. Reason why people would start rumors.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I just wanted to go back and clarify again, since, Mr. Thompson speculated on what I'm saying, and I'm not scared, and I don't quiver in fear of meeting head-on a dark time in history. What I'm unwilling to do is vote yes on something that is largely speculation, whether it could be common sense-wise looked at, well, the time was like that, maybe we have no real proof outside of these articles, and that's a really big problem for me. As a member of this council, where we have all this documentation of stuff that we do, there's not one piece of anything put in front of me with anybody expressing the interest to have black people not live there. I can't get behind this. I wanted to. I was looking for that. I went through it twice. There's not one thing. And I think it's a real scary time when we start just using news articles as proof, let alone 100-year-old news articles as our sole source of proof for something as serious and as contentious as a subject like racism. I think it's very hard to go forward with not having the proof. And that's just where I'm at with it. I wish there was something that I could get behind and say, hey, I'm going to fight with you guys, not against you guys, and this is why. And we just don't have it. Not only were these residents, compensated fairly for their property, there's no proof that they were kicked out, their homes were taken. I'm just not seeing it in the documents that were presented, and I do appreciate you presenting them to us. And I just have a really hard time with that. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Mrs. Hoover.
I want to respond to a few things. One, Mr. Braden, this is deeply personal. Racism is deeply personal to me. So yes, do I have a vendetta against Norwood? Absolutely not. I've raised my 3 children here. I plan on being here until they take me out of my house. This is a vendetta, if you will, against racism. This is about a reckoning I believe our community has been coming towards for years about our past and about what I hope is a more perfect future. I do take issue with the fact that we have 1 newspaper article and 99 articles with a woman's name on it. That says to me, frankly, you've not read the materials because that is simply not accurate. We have ordinances, we have lawsuits, so that's to answer Mr. Kelch. They were not fairly compensated, which is in the material based on the lawsuit and the numbers, if you would like to read them.
I have them written down.
Okay, so they were not fairly compensated. The park was created. They did declare eminent domain. Those things are factual. We have the court documents for those. Those are not newspaper articles. The lawsuits are not newspaper articles. There was rigorous research. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover. Ms. Royce?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Susan said. There are deeds transferring the property to Norwood, and then they include the lawsuit language where the Hearst claim they were not fairly compensated. Again, it's in the emails.
They claim.
Sure, they claim. I
Okay.
mean, it's who
All
you
right.
choose to believe, right? And frankly, I mean, talk about rumors to accuse someone of having a vendetta. That was a pretty big accusation to make. But
I think she's the one
I'm
that
gonna
said it.
move on.
Mr. Braden, point of order.
I want to thank.
She has the floor.
I want to thank Susan Hoover for working on this so hard. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. She worked really hard on this. She contacted me the first week I was appointed to council, not elected, appointed to council, and asked for help on this. She has worked on this consistently for a year. She has looped everyone in on this for a year. And for people to sit here and say they just choose not to believe the historical documents presented to them, the historians presenting them. It seems like we choose to believe the Norwood Historical Society on almost everything else. Pretty selective. I'm going to move on. I am very proud and excited to vote for this tonight, to vote yes. That's all I'm going to say.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yep, and I agree with Ms. Royce, and thank you all for those of you who came and spoke. I found it very moving, and I appreciate, maybe no matter what, there may not be a level of evidence that can convince folks, and like you said, we'll be able to vote this through, and I'm just glad that we were all able to hear the words being spoken. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted, because I do have some of the numbers written down, because I have read everything a couple times. So they did the bond issue, I guess $10,000, which is in today's money about $179,000. I believe, and I don't have it right in front of me, so correct me if I'm wrong, that they claimed they were short $800 worth of their property, which is roughly $14K in today's dollars. So that's not too far off of, them getting ripped off. I don't think that paints the picture of them getting ripped off. And in one of the articles, it did claim that when they did sue, they sued for $10,000 extra in damages. So for missing out on $800, they sued for damages for $10,000 more. Okay, these people accepted the amount of money that they were being given and then turned around and sued for more, an exorbitant amount more. And that's one thing we got to consider as well. Again, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I wrote it down as I was going. But I just don't see that. I don't see them being ripped off. I don't see them getting super undervalued. And in another article, it states that the solicitor at the time, Dwyer, when they sued, they wanted to go in front of a jury to correct the amount that they were shorted. And due to a law at the time, and this is not a law, it was just anti-beneficial or beneficial to African-American people, it was just a law at the time that that it was the solicitor could go value a property and consult real estate experts at the time, which he did, so he didn't have to present it to a jury. So the value stood, the amount that they were paid stood. That's about as legal as this thing gets that I found, and I was excited when I found that. That's why I remember so much of it, because that's the kind of things I was looking for, legal kind of documents from the city saying that the purpose was this, not just expressed, subjective theories, which is what we have in front of us. That's it. That's all I have.
Mr. Thompson?
I'd like to sum up my thoughts if possible. I think everybody's trying to sum things up. We have a situation here where Mr. Kelch described a situation which he believed never happened. There was no evidence that this happened, despite hundreds of documents, only to be followed up by the argument that if it did happen, I'm talking. If it did happen.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Mr. Thompson?
I'm curious how many more times Mr. Thompson's going to be allowed to infer that I've spoken certain words which I've not said.
You have a chance to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
I believe what happened was a follow-up where this thing that we have no proof of happening, we use those documents to prove that the people that this happened to were just out for the money. So I find that interesting that it didn't happen because we didn't have the documents, but then it did happen because we did have the documents. Lastly, I would like to comment on something that Mr. Braden said, that this was rumor and we don't have proof of this. Well, we have 100 documents of varying kinds of proof, yet the alternate reality that you presented was that this was somebody in Cincinnati who had it out for Norwood, which we have zero documents.
I was commenting on Ms. France. Come on, man.
Come on, man. Zero.
Come on, dude. I was commenting on whatever.
I'm repeating what you said. This is a serious discussion. If you were making a joke, that was in poor taste.
Yeah. Come on now.
Let's vote.
A motion on the floor by Mrs. Hoover, second by Mr. Thompson. You have the third reading. You just say in its entirety?
Yes, please, sir.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes.
Resolution supporting the placement of a historic marker at the entrance of Marsh Park in acknowledgement that the park was established by the City of Norwood in 1923 for the sole purpose of preventing blacks from owning homes there, supporting a request for grant funds for such marker, and declaring an emergency. Whereas the Ohio Historical Markers Program has led to 1,750 unique markers telling the state's history, telling the unique stories of the people, places, things, and events that helped shape individual communities, as well as Ohio and our nation. And whereas from 1907 to 1922, there was a 4-family home on the north side of Marsh Avenue, the current site of Marsh Park. And whereas in 1922, George and Sarah Hurst, who had resided at that 4-family home for many years, purchased the vacant lot next door and began construction on a new home. And whereas the Hursts were black and were their building contractors. And whereas, as reported in the Cincinnati Enquirer, Cincinnati Post, and Cincinnati Commercial Tribune, a delegation of 25 Norwood residents came to the Norwood City Council and petitioned the city to prohibit the establishment of a Negro settlement on Marsh Avenue. And whereas, being informed by then Norwood Law Director O.F. Dwyer that an ordinance barring blacks from Marsh Avenue would be unconstitutional, and whereas, following the example of communities around the country, Norwood City Council instead approved a $10,000 bond issue and exercised the power of eminent domain to seize and purchase the property of the Hursts and other owners for the public purpose of establishing Marsh Park. And whereas the citizens of Norwood benefit from a more complete telling of our history, and whereas the use of eminent domain at the local level, in combination with decades of federal and state policies such as urban renewal, redlining, FHA refusal to insure mortgages in neighborhoods and developments with minority residents, and the VA's refusal to provide GI Bill mortgages to black veterans have separated hundreds of thousands of blacks from their property and locked them out of generational wealth. And whereas the Norwood Historical Society, in collaboration with a local historian and Councilwoman Susan Hoover, gathered and reviewed over 100 pieces of primary sources that tell the history of Marsh Park as related herein. And whereas Council of the City of Norwood desires to acknowledge and encourage an open discussion of Norwood's history to reconcile a century-old wrong brought about by eminent domain, the power that governments have to seize private property for public use, and whereas the installation of a historical marker is one way to further the process of healing and justice and to engage in the reconciliation of past injustices, and whereas the deadline to apply for an Ohio historical marker and for the current round of funding for the Historical Markers Grant Program is May 1st, 2023. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. Section 1, the Council of the City of Norwood expresses its support for the placement of a historical marker at the entrance of Marsh Park in acknowledgement that the park was established by the City of Norwood in 1923 for the sole purpose of preventing blacks from owning homes there. Section 2, the Council of the City of Norwood expresses its support for an application to be filed for an Ohio historical marker and for funding from the Historical Markers Grant Program for an historical marker to help offset the cost of such a marker. Section 3, this resolution is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, welfare, and safety of the City of Norwood. The reason for an emergency is to ensure a grant application may be filed in thorough and complete form by May 1st, 2023 for current round of funding.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mrs. Hoover.
I'd like to make a motion, we pass the resolution.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to pass the resolution. Mrs. Franson?
I'd like to second.
Second by Mrs. Franson. Any further discussion? Please call.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Mrs. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
No.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No, sir.
All members present voting, we have 5 ayes, 2 noes. The resolution of the ordinance passes. Moving on to item Moving on to item M1, ordinance promoting the citywide street sales, May 12th and 13th, 2023, September 8th and 9th, 2023, and abating sale and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franson.
I move we suspend the rules and have all three readings tonight.
Motion by Mrs. Franson to suspend the rules and have all three readings. You have a second, Ms. Weiss?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Weiss. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance promoting the citywide street sales, May 12th and 13th, 2023, and September 8th and 9th, 2023, and abating all permit fees associated with the sale and declaring an emergency. Ordinance promoting the citywide street sales, May 12th and 13th, 2023, and September 8th and 9th, 2023, and abating all permit fees associated with the sale and declaring an emergency. Ordinance promoting the citywide street sales, May 12th and 13th, 2023, and September 8th and 9th, 2023, and abating all permit fees associated with the sale and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance, please.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hoover?
I just have a procedural question from folks who've been on council longer. This came up on my radar, so that's why I brought the resolution. It doesn't seem like this is on anyone's calendar to flag that we need to do this twice a year. I'm wondering how you guys tend to remember, or you sort of hope that someone remembers that we have to do this twice a year, because that's not a great strategy.
Mr. Thompson?
It usually gets closed and somebody reminds us.
Mrs. Hoover?
Could we have a better strategy? Because that feels like that reactionary thing
suggest?
I'm thinking we should be moving away from.
What do you suggest, Ms. Hoover?
I'm suggesting we have a system in place. I don't know if that would be in the clerk of courts or the president of council or, sorry, I feel like I don't care, I'm on my way out. That's on someone's calendar rather than we expect someone to remember.
I think
Mr.
we
Bonzo.
can put it on the calendar with.
Council should do that.
Yeah. Mrs. Franzen?
Yeah, I think it might be something that we can add to possibly like a calendar that the city has, the one with all the meeting space, of like X number of weeks before these things that come up every year, this is when we should introduce this ordinance so we can pass it in regular order. Would that be a good way, if that is something we all have access to?
I think Mr. Mayor has a comment.
May I?
Yeah.
You have a clerk of council, and hopefully you have a clerk of council that's not changing consistently, which was the change that you guys made recently. A planning schedule is something, I'm not talking about.
Secretary?
The secretary.
The secretary, excuse me, the secretary.
Rachel.
The secretary to council. But you can put together, she should be putting together a planning schedule that outlines all the things, and then there are particulars that, to her, to mention it to the president of council, and then that they move. But I think that's a great idea for the secretary to do, and now that we have a person that's going to be consistently there, it shouldn't be left to somebody to say, oh, hey, who's supposed to do that?
Mrs. Hoover?
Yeah, you don't want me to try to remember. Is that something that Mr. Gears could ask Ms. Mullen to do?
Yes.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? See, we had a motion by Mr. Braden and a second by Mrs. Hoover to pass the ordinance. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item M2, ordinance approving the Seventh Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the city of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Mr. Braden?
Motion to have all three readings and declaring an emergency?
Motion by Mr. Braden to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Can I have a second? Ms. Franzen?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
All right, so we reviewed at a high level this FRP at our finance meeting last Tuesday. There have been changes made to it since then. We did not receive the final FRP until late last night. I got it this morning and forwarded on to council members so that they could see it before the meeting today. I'll just be open and frank. I have issues with this version of the FRP. I wasn't able to, well, tried to express some of them during the Finance Committee meeting, but then after being able to dig in farther, I'll go in just kind of high level what it is. I understand the amount of work that goes into this, and I appreciate all the work that goes into this, and I understand the need for expediency. I also remember asking nearly every year that I've been here, then we get it more than the day that we're supposed to pass it so we can have a better chance of reviewing. The two issues I have the biggest problem with is by the time we get to the end of the 5 years, we're spending $1.5 million dollars a year more than we make. I brought that up at the Finance Committee. We talked about it. I do understand that we tend to estimate our revenue going forward 5 years to be flat, to give us plenty of wiggle room. And year over year, our revenue tends to grow. But currently, we've got a financial recovery plan. We're 5 years out. We've got $1.5 million in the bank. And the 6 year, if the trend continues, we would go 1.5 million in the hole because we would spend all the money. So I had an issue with that. But I've been doing this for 6 years now, and I know that extended forecast gets updated every year. It's the best that we can do. But that added with what I see when I dig farther into the capital improvements worksheet is really what causes me concern. We've got a situation where from the last time that we've got capital improvement dollars in the fire department is 2025. We've got $0 allocated for capital improvements in the fire department for 2026 and 2027. Fire department is our most expensive department typically. They have the most personnel, the most equipment. They're also supposed to be getting a fire truck in the next couple of years, which isn't represented at all in the capital expenditures. When I look down, I see a similar pattern. Once we get out past 2 years, dollars tend to dwindle in our capital plan. We got our parks and playgrounds. This year it was a $214,000 budget. Next year, $154,000. 2025, $60,000. 2026, $30,000. 2027, $30,000. Community Senior Center, $37,000 this year, $115,000 next year, and $45,000, and $0. What I see when I look at the total dollar amounts for capital projects, 2023, $1.7 million, 2024, $1.1 million, 2025, $742,000, 2026, $527,000, 2027, $527,000, $527,000 projected dollars for capital, all capital needs during those years. My fear is that what we have is a plan that the numbers work, but just isn't a good plan. It doesn't get us 5 years out to be in a good place. We've got a fantastic 2.5-year plan here. Everything is covered that we need for the next 2 years. And it leaves me at this place where I'm not sure what to do, because I'm the Finance Committee Chair. I think my opinion kind of matters. I could say I don't want to vote for this, and I want it better. I could understand having a $1.5 million deficit at the end of 5 years if we're actually continuing to do capital improvements like we're supposed to. Quite frankly, I can't believe this got through the state auditor in the way that it is. My first year on council, I caught nearly $1 million error that would have had us at less than $1 million in the red at the end of 5 years. And it was enough for the state auditor to say, that's not a good plan. Here we are at a spending deficit of 1.5 million after 5 years. It's okay. So we can do a couple of things. We can pass this like we always do, knowing that next year we're going to have a different auditor, and we're going to take another look at this. Because if we don't pass this, we run the risk of not being able to spend the money we need to spend in 2023 for another couple of months. That puts a real hardship on our departments. By the way, I spoke to the heads of several departments about this. That's how I know it puts a hardship on them. But my opinion is that this is not a good plan. It is not in the spirit of why we project 5 years out. It gives us deficits, and it does not cover the capital improvements that we need to factor in to our spending. And so I'm totally transparent, totally honest. I have no idea how I'm going to vote on this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Kelch?
Thank you, Mr. President. Did Mr. Stith, through the chair to Mr. Thompson, if I could, did Mr. Stith really kind of explain why it's like that? Because I know certain things on here that are zeros are like, like, for instance, on the first, or the page 2 of it, you got like city property, replace fence, or replace corp line signage. We got that for 24, then we got 0 after that.
Right. I was looking more for things that are cumulative.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Like, there's some things on here where it does say it, and it's gonna be zeros in the next couple of years because the need falls off. But, and this is kind of a question I think you're saying, and what I agree with, if you are saying it, is there's nothing else listed under each kind of ticket item where there's funding for, 25, 26, or 27, outside of parks, where I kind of push that one, where we got it kind of going. I see that also in the community center windows, a couple places, but not as much as it has been in the past, where because we have a lot of deferred maintenance. We are getting a lot done. But I kind of, if that's what you're saying, I agree with you that there's a lot more, I think, that needs done that's not accounted for than what is showing.
I can respond real quick.
Yes, sir.
Yes, a lot of the spending that we've done the last couple of years is deferred maintenance, which is good, and we need to do that. My fear is in the departments where I'm seeing such small dollar amounts for the total department that I don't believe they can adequately run their department.
Yeah.
Mrs. Franson?
Sorry, you go first.
Oh, whoever.
I additionally had a lot of questions, and I tried watching the Finance Committee meeting. Unfortunately, there wasn't any sound, so that was entertaining. I wrote a bunch of questions down from the FRP that I got then, and then I got a new one from you this morning, and the one I got this morning is different than the one that's now in front of me. So with each iteration, I have some new questions, one of which is whose budget numbers are being used, because my understanding, I've also spoken with some department heads, that the fire department has a 10-year plan, and I don't see that represented here. I don't see the fire truck. I understand we're going to need a new sweeper, street sweeper in another department, and that doesn't look like that's adequately funded. And then there are some things that just don't, in our staffing, it has, the email from this morning has 49 firefighters, but we have 52. And now in this, it has, the one in front of me now has 51. But it says that it was 2023 funded with different numbers. So I had a lot of questions for Mr. Stith. I'm disappointed he's not here tonight. I'm wondering if we vote, what happens if we only do one reading and we ask him to come back and explain some of these?
Mr. Mayor.
can I comment on some of the stuff that you guys have brought up? Because this is actually the mayor's budget. It is the financial recovery plan that I have to put together. And I've worked extensively on this. Now, there are a lot of numbers that the auditor, the state auditor and the auditor work with constantly. And they are constantly going back and forth. So Jim will put this together. I'll look at it. We sat down in Noah's office. We went through things. The budgets are put together and sent to us, to the administrative team, to me, to the safety service director. We got to go through those budgets and try to figure out what works and doesn't work. Because this is government, and this is people asking for money, and you think, you only have so much of the pie. You could not take the 10-year plan for the fire department and put it into this and really expect us to thrive and do well, because there would be nothing for public works, nothing for streets. There would be nothing for anything else. And I know they're looking at their department and saying, this is what we need for the safety of the city. But then there's also reality, and they recognize that too. And every department will put in, I mean, you recall that when we had our own dispatch down here, they put in for a budget of over $1,100,000 for the year that we said, wait a minute, we can't afford $1,100,000. And then they came back, and when they said, oh, well, you're thinking about going to the county, oh, they come back and say, well, we can get by with $800,000. We're okay at $800,000. Like, wait a minute, $800,000 is too much. And now we're paying less than $200,000 for our dispatch services? So there's a difference in what really needs to be done and what can be done. This is a 5-year plan. Remember, you talked about deferred maintenance, so just quickly in passing. We had 16 years of deferred maintenance. We have been playing catch up and getting buildings back in shape and our parks back in shape for the last 2 years, the last 3 years. There is going to be a time, because there was 16 years of nothing, and then there were 3 years of spending a ton of money, where you get to the point where you go, oh, we don't have to spend a ton. We don't have to recover from all the, so that is the 5-year. And if we had a 10-year, you'd probably see some of that, you're gonna have to see some of that capital go back up because we go back to it. But it's just like anything else. I mean, I wish that we never had that deferred maintenance and our capital would have stayed steady. And that's been a problem for the city of Norwood for years, is you have these peaks and valleys. And we're trying to stabilize it out. We recognize that in those last 3 years, it's going to be light on capital improvements. But quite frankly, we only have so much parkland. If you go to Hunter Park and look at it now, it used to be a field where kids could play soccer. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's dog parks in there. There's all sorts of stuff in there. We can fill all of our parks to the brim with equipment, but I don't know that that's really what we need to do. So there's a lot, when you talk about that capital dropping off, it's going to drop off. And when you talk about what's in the complement for firefighters, whether we have 49 in the complement in the union contract, or whether we staff up to 52, and then guess what? Oh, well, 2 people, 1 guy resigned, another guy is actually retiring. There's always additional or decreases in staffing. In the fire department, that hurts. And I know Jim Stith, the auditor, has hit those numbers all the time. If you run 1 more fireman, well, we're going to run 1 more fireman because we know these 2 firefighters are leaving. We know these 2 police officers are leaving. Well, we know the chief, the police chief is leaving. We know the previous chief was here for how many years, and now we've got a new chief and he's in here. Well, do you change the plan from that plan to this plan because we found out the chief's leaving, and you guys approved his salary last time, which is about $25,000 less? Man, that's a big change. We should change it. I don't agree. There's a point in time where you go, we got to pass this, and we continue to work on it. We continue to work on the budget. It is a dynamic, changing document, and we are trying to plot out those other 3 years, but really what we're plotting out is what we're doing this year, because we don't have it set for this year, and what we're doing in -- and we're trying to lay a path forward for those other 3 years. But it's going to change, like you said. It changes. It's dynamic. It really does. So this is something that, for me and Jim, for Jim and I, we started on this when we got budgets in from all the different department heads. That was September, November timeframe. We've been working on this. We were supposed to have a Financial Recovery Commission meeting on January 31st. That got canceled. I mean, that's where they provide some guidance and we get some stuff. but we've got one person that we work with the Auditor of State. She has a very limited time, although we pay them $75,000 a year for their services to help us while we're in this fiscal emergency. Although we're paying them, they have a very limited amount of time. And typically, what happens is when it gets to a time where we're supposed to turn this stuff in, we get a couple more additional changes that she's had 2 or 3 more pages of, I found this or I found that. And I'd like to say this is a perfect document, that every number, every cell, everything is perfect on it, but it's not. And we are going to find things. So, I'd like to see this passed with 3 readings tonight. I'd like to get it in front. Our next meeting is not until April 11th with the Financial Planning and Recovery Commission. It might be that what we send to the Auditor of State, to our financial supervisor, it might be that she looks at this and says, unacceptable, you guys need to do something, get it back to, well, then I'll be coming back to you guys with a change plan again and probably asking for special meetings to get this passed so we can keep moving. Because it does stymie us. It does stop the city from any of the progress. I've talked before about how we're doing everything late in the season. All the contractors, everybody, all the vendors, they're all booked up. And then we go to them and say, hey, we've got, $100,000 to spend on this. And they're like, yeah, well, your project's going to be at the end of the list, and it's not just $100,000, it's $125,000, because we really don't need that business right now. So, this is an important document. Is it perfect? No. Does it get changed every year? Yes. Will it continue to be changed? Yeah. That's a fact. And I'd love to get it to you a month ahead of time. But what happens is, within that month ahead of time that I got it to you, we'd get 3 more things back from the Auditor of State saying, well, we think you should be doing it this way or that way. Instead of, when you look at it and you say, well, every employee could get a 10% increase, because the way it's written, the way our documents are written, every employee could get a 10% increase. And the Auditor of State says, then you need a budget for every person to get a 10% increase. That's not realistic, but that's what we've got to put in the plan at times, because that's how they dictate that we run this. But okay, it's not going to happen, but it's there because it could. So there are a lot of challenges with this, a lot of challenges with getting it to you early. It's and I know I'd be the first one. I sat in those seats. I was a finance committee chair. I always wanted the information early. I wanted to be able to. It's just not achievable. I wish it was. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be on a soapbox.
That's all right. I just have a follow-up question.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah. So you're okay with the fire department having $0 for capital in 2026 and 2027?
That's going to change. It
I know,
has to change.
but this is the FRP that you're asking us to pass right now.
Yes.
And look, this is the 6th one I've seen. Been doing this for longer than I wanted to. Mr. Brain's been doing this for longer than he's wanted to. We're tired of this. We want to be out of it. We're not going to get out of it if we can't show them that in 5 years we look good.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
It's not going to end. We're going to have these 5-year plans. Even when we're out, even when the Financial Recovery Commission is disbanded and we're out of it, we're still going to have 5-year, and we're still going to have 5-year projections. And the Finance Committee is still going to have to sit down and go through it with us and all that.
Excellent. That's what should happen.
Yeah.
That's right now. If you did this after we were out of financial emergency, there would be no state auditor to say that you've really only got a 3-year plan here, not a 5.
That's where you guys would be working with us.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Is you've got a 3-year plan here, not a 5. And I know it's a hard work. Please understand. I know how much work that you put into it. But it's not remotely realistic past 2020. And it's just, I've looked at these before when it was. I've got experience looking at these and seeing what 5 years working looks like. And that's what shocked me when I saw this, is I think we know better.
Anyone else? Ms. Frenzen?
Well, I have the unhappy distinction of being the first to vote on this either way, and being still pretty much a novice when it comes to the finances. I don't want to pass something that is not going to be good for the city as a whole over 5 years, but I also don't want to hurt the department heads who need this money. So I don't know. I honestly, I have only the information that Eric and you and what Jim Stith has told us in Finance Committee. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know if anyone else has any opinions about how they're going to vote. I feel anxious being the first one to vote. So if anyone has, or Eric or Mr. Thompson or anyone else who has more experience, if they have opinions about what might be the best, most equitable way forward for everyone involved, not just, the people here, but the department heads, I would love to hear it.
Mrs. Hoover.
I just have a question, which actually wasn't answered, which is if we only do one reading tonight, what would the consequence be? And I also want to acknowledge, I do not wish this on anyone. I know there are, hundreds and hundreds of hours of work that went into this. I'm aware that I have a lot of questions that have not yet been answered. So if that were to, and I also am not sure how I'm voting, but my question is, if we only do one reading, what are the consequences? That was my question.
Mr. Reed.
The Financial Planning and Supervision Commission is scheduled to meet next on April 11th. So, and that's Tuesday, I think that's a day of a council meeting, isn't it?
Yes.
The morning of the council meeting. So, for us not to pass this, between now and then, for us not to pass something means it's May before council passes it. And then, the financial recovery, the commission has a hard time meeting. They've really, like the January meeting was canceled, there's a lot of challenges with getting it. So I guess it could be, the last one that we passed was not until May 24th, and that put us, we're halfway into the year before we can do it. Well, you might as well just mark off a lot of capital projects. A lot of things that we want to do, we really can't do. You can't start that late in the year and get everything, because all those things have to come in front of council to be approved too, so.
You still need an appropriations ordinance.
Please?
So you still need your appropriations ordinance after this passes too, so.
Yeah, there's the appropriations ordinance after. So, but, if you're willing to do special council meetings, that's something that could happen in the next 2 weeks, call a couple special council meetings, and you guys pass it prior to the financial planning and supervision meeting, that's the other option.
Mr. Reed.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So just my opinion, for what it's worth, we do, first of all, I agree with Councilman Thompson, very valid. We know that there's some things that we need to do in there that we're not doing, and they need to be corrected. However, I guess my point would be that this is a living, breathing document. We come in here week on week, and we change this every time we come in here, we change this. Every week we come in, that's what we do. We change, we vote to pay for things, and we make things right, and we, pay bills. This changes, this is a changing document, so my opinion, we pass this, we send it to the state. We have auditors of state that are governing us right now, and they have been involved in this, hundreds of comments that I know of, and been corrected already. So we pass this, we send it on to the auditors of state and let them look at it. And knowing that this is a flawed document in 5 years, we have a good 2-year, 3-year plan here. Knowing that this is a flawed, we pass it, we send it to the auditors of state, and we have them take a look at it. And then when it comes back to us, we can then look at each other and make changes that we have to do, and because it's a living, breathing document, and we can change it at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mrs. Hoover.
I'm considering the idea of requesting a special council meeting. One of the things that was discussed last council meeting was the reluctance to declare an emergency and have all 3 readings. This feels like something that I've had, 3 days to look at, and even the last version is different than the one from this morning. This feels important enough to me that would warrant to have a special meeting. That would be my inclination. I'm swayable. I'm not a numbers person. This is horrifying to me. But that would be a direction I think I would be willing to do.
Mrs. Wintermeyer?
I'm leaning towards going definitely for special meetings. There is no plan for 26 and 27. If there was, and those numbers can change, I understand that, but there's zero. So I'd be more comfortable voting on a plan, understanding that it might change in the future. And if we have to meet again to make sure that we have a plan to present to the state prior to that, I'd be happy to meet again.
Thank you, Mr. Wintermeyer. Mr. Mayor?
What do you mean by there's no plan for 26 and 27? 26 and 27 are fully populated. There's capital plans that are not.
Specifically with the fire department, and there's things in there that we've talked about, like the fire truck, things like that, that it doesn't show in the plan.
Mr. Brady?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So you want to have another meeting? What do you want to talk about during that meeting? What are we going to do? What are we going to do during that meeting that we can't do right now? We know that our police and fire is our budget. So where are we at? We know that we have to pay our police and fire. So what's the meeting about? So how do we know without comments from the state? Because this document's pretty complicated. I'm not going to act like I'm following it as much as I can, as good as I can. But we need input from our auditors of state that are overseeing us right now, so they can at least say, hey, no, this is what you need to do. So I would just suggest we pass it, we give it to the auditors of state. We can meet till we're blue in the face, but you're not getting nothing done here. We have to. Police and fire is our budget, so that's it right there. So 2, 3 firemen, and there goes the budget. So that's our meeting. So you want to talk about it now? Let's talk about it now. 2, 3 firemen, that's our budget, I think. So that's something we can talk about right now. We don't have to have 10 meetings. That's just my opinion, whatever it's worth.
Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
Just clarify, this actually has been shared with the auditor of state, like, a lot. The first time it went to the auditor was on February 2nd.
Right. Yes,
So
sir.
it's, clarify, tons of work goes into this, and it's not just sat on forever. It went February 2nd. There has been lots of back and forth, and part of the problem with going to the auditor of state is you send it to the auditor, and it comes back with 12 pages of changes. And you make those changes, you're like, yeah, I'm done with the revisions. And they send it, hey, check it, how's it look? And it comes back with 26 pages of changes. So it is an imperfect process, and it's a difficult process to work with. Right now, you're saying our police and fire are our budgets. Well, in 26 and 27, they aren't funded. So,
Good point.
From a capital standpoint.
Very highly funded.
Personnel is funded. But that's what, so we talk about, you want to talk now? That's what you start having to look at, and this is the thing that we've been dealing with since I've been on council, is, okay, so what are the things that we absolutely have to have? Well, we have to be able to pay our personnel. That's what makes our city our city. So you plan out your personnel, and then you start getting into situations here where we've got $0 to do things that we need to do beyond 3 years from now. That means, in my opinion, that we need to look at the plan that we've got here and today, right now. Maybe we've got too many personnel that makes it when you play, and I like our personnel, but I'm just saying.
Are you sure?
Yeah, but it's like one of those things. It's like, so you've got a situation where when you take what's working right now and you extrapolate that out over 5 years, it doesn't work anymore. And I like that the spirit of this exercise is for it to work. The way we get out of fiscal emergency, you can go next. The way we get out of fiscal emergency is for this to work, and for some reason to do all the little document things that we can't ever seem to get done. We're never going to get out if we can't do step one, which is make us look good over 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I just wanted to comment on the revenue pieces real quick here. So, because I heard a couple comments about it today. So looking at the total revenue, I mean, there's a couple of things, reasons
What
why you're
page,
going to
sir?
see.
What
Yeah.
page?
Oh, sorry, page 9. This is the very top, the very top on the general fund. So there's a couple of things that kind of add to why you're going to see more capital improvements earlier in the plan. The first part is that we have a cash balance now, so if if the thing is that we want to spread out the capital improvements so that there's more later, well, what you're basically going to see is we're just going to be delaying projects so that we can do them later so that the plan looks nicer. That's one thing to consider. The other thing is that right now, I mean, just looking at if you look at the interest investment income line, in 2021, we had $9,000 in investment income. Last year, we were able to get $202,000 in investment income. This year, we think we're going to get $365,000. So, however, we don't think that the interest rates are going to always be this high. So, or there's a chance that they won't. So we had to balance in, bank in that that's going to go down in 2024 and 2025 because it likely won't be historically as high as we're able to get now. The other thing on the municipal earnings tax, so, we did have, last year, we had, over $20 million, but there was over $1 million payment that we got just from one company that was very abnormal. Now, I hope that we get that same payment again this next year, but there's no guarantee. If we have an extra $1 million from 30 different companies, I would be way more like, okay, I think we can feel more comfortable, but it was one company. And it's just something that I just don't want you all banking on that and then it causing even more issues later. So, I mean, we feel really comfortable with where it is, and I know it's only about a 1% increase, each year after that, but there's still quite a bit of uncertainty with some of the economic environment when it comes to work from home and other things. So that's why the revenues is the way it is. But yeah, I just want to say, so I personally, and I'll just give one more thing, this is really outside of me being the treasurer, I guess, well, maybe not, but I would recommend that you all pass this, and I only say that because, as you all have said too, there are a lot of things that need to get done at the city, and there's a lot of great things that are going to happen in 2023, and I do think that, like, all the feedback you all are giving the mayor, and I think all of this is super helpful. I just think that if we don't pass it, this commission, they won't meet before June. I mean, I can imagine them not meeting before June if we don't do this now, and then it really puts the mayor and the city administration in a bind. So just my 2 cents, and yeah, I yield. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Anyone else? Ms. Franzen?
For what it's worth, and after hearing the feedback from everyone, I'm more inclined to vote yes to pass this, although we do need a better 5-year plan. But my more immediate concern is that these capital projects that we have planned that need to happen on time so that we don't end up spending even more because of delays, which ends up putting us even more in the red and more behind. That is my feeling, and obviously, we'll see how the vote goes.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Anyone else? We have a motion by Mr. Braden, a second by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present. We have 6 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes.
Ordinance approving the 7th Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the City of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Ordinance approving the 7th Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the City of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Ordinance approving the 7th Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the City of Norwood and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden.
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mrs. Franzen.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mr. Kelch,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Nope.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members are present. We have 6 ayes, 1 no. The ordinance passes. Moving on to administrative reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you for some timid yeses. Yes, I apologize. I mean, this is the world we live in. It's a tough time. We started out with the presentation. I asked for the Southern Ohio Regional Transit Authority to come and give that presentation because it was, and if that was, he made it sort of sound like that was the same presentation that we received previously, but I don't recall that presentation being the one that was received differently. I'm on the advisory board for SORTA, and as we work on the bus rapid, as we were working on the bus rapid transit stuff, there were some really interesting graphics that they used to talk about how the different systems would work. And Susan, Mrs. Hoover, you brought up, how do we tap into those resources? We're tapping into those resources. Noah and I have worked, and we are working with SORTA, because as we do our Montgomery Road changes, we want to encompass some of the items that they want to do for the bus rapid transit. So they will do, hopefully, we can get them to spend more money and help, because we've already received some sort of money for the paving that we're doing. So there's a lot of good stuff that's going on with that. I want to keep those guys engaged. I want to keep SORTA engaged with the city of Norwood because they have some very deep pockets and they can really help us improve our bus stops. Our bus stops have been terrible for years and years and years. And if you look at the bus rapid transit, the line that runs right through Montgomery Road, we're right in the middle of it. So that's going to be perfect. Put a hub right here that gets us out where we need to go, either downtown or up quicker. It's going to be really some great and very exciting stuff that can happen, and we're going to continue to try to tap into that. There was a long discussion, and I know I don't want to take up a lot of time because I know it's a later night, but there are 7 city council members that had what I would consider to be an incredibly good discussion on something that could be a real bonus to the city, but I can also see the other side of it where people would say, why would we want to air our dirty laundry like that? But it's our history, and it's an important, and I thought that discussion was important, and I learned a lot from every time you look at history, you learn from it. But it is not, and I think that's something that is important to be said. In 1922, there was a mayor and there was a city council, and there were decisions made. It wasn't the mayor that made a decision and said, so it shall be done. That's not how it worked then, and that's not how it works now. And I appreciate you guys having the discussion. You're all very civil. You're all working, to explain your situation and your thoughts on it. And I sincerely appreciate that. I think that the citizens of the city of Norwood appreciate that also. I also think you got to look back to 1922 as like the Roaring 20s, the Flapper Girls and all that stuff. And I would like to think that in the city of Norwood, there were many people that lived in the city of Norwood that were very happy that Mr. Parker's ex-wife or widow was living in the city of Norwood. And there were many people that were not racist in this area, but there were racists. And we can't turn a blind eye to that. But there were also good people there. So I hope that everybody will keep that in mind. We got to learn from history, or you're doomed to repeat the failures. Talk a little bit, just real quickly, the Forest Avenue project, I just walked down through there. They're making progress. I know everybody wants that open. I got it from about 3 people on Sunday the other day saying, open that up, come on. But they're making progress, and that'll be fixed, and we'll be in good shape. So I think that's really all I have. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions or comments for Mayor Schneider? Thank you, Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonzo, good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I had previously sent an email to council, but just want to make sure everybody knows that we have launched a new e-file system. So you can go to the City of Norwood's homepage, norwoodohio.gov, and there's a tax button on the front of that. It'll kind of get you to the tax department, and you can learn about the e-file and work on it. The best part about the e-file, in my opinion, is that there's no more filling out. If you use this optional service, it's not mandatory. You can still come into the tax office. We're happy to help you. But there's no more filling out the form. And every time I fill out the form, or previously, I now know much better, but I would get confused about which box do I use on the W-2 at times, for which thing. And Ava would always have to correct me in the office, and which she was always very nice about it. So anyways, long story short is that this does that for you now. You actually will enter in your W-2, like you'll put your W-2 information, which boxes that are relevant in the system, and it will populate the form for you. So it'll give you an estimated amount of tax. If you disagree with it, you can pay it a different tax. And then when it actually gets reviewed, we'll send you a letter and tell you if you overpaid or underpaid. So it's a great system. With that, we're also launching tax amnesty. So if you start by May 1st, you need to reach out to the tax department by May 1st. But if you have prior years, and we're looking at like 2018 or 2019 and beyond, but if you've got prior years where you didn't file, and maybe you should have filed, any of those extra fees or penalties that might have been added in a normal time, those will get waived. So the big thing is just to start the process. Just reach out to the tax department so we know that this is on your radar, and we'll help you through, all of that. So just to the residents at home. But yeah, we're really excited about that. We really want to try to do what we can to increase the amount of tax revenue that we get from, residents that live here, and of course, we appreciate all the work you all do to increase economic development, to increase, the withholdings that we end up getting from businesses. So with that, if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Boswell? Thank you, sir.
Cool, thank you all.
Moving on to item O, unfinished business. Any unfinished business this evening? Then we'll move on to new business. Any new business this evening? Mrs. Hoover.
You know me, I always got a thing. I need to reschedule the Housing, Health, and Public Safety meeting. We had to reschedule it. Mr. Braden, I didn't hear back from you about dates that are available. Sorry, I'm trying to pull those up. Tuesday, April the 4th, Thursday the 6th, Tuesday the 11th, Wednesday the 12th, Thursday the 13th, at 5 or 5:30.
Anytime you'd like, Ms. Hoover.
Anytime?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Too much pressure now. Let's see. What's April? No, I can't do that.
I kind of like Tuesday.
Thursday? You like Thursday?
That's Thursday, okay.
How about Thursday the 6th? 5:30 or 6? What works best for folks?
I like 6.
You like 6? We'll do that. Does that work for you?
Thursday, what's the date, ma'am?
Thursday, April the 6th. I'll get that agenda out soon. Second item, sir, I'd like to put the Marsh Park survey into the Parks Committee for discussion. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it for me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mrs. Friend?
Well, speaking of Parks Committee, I had talked to Mr. Gabbard of the Rec Department and wanted to get an update on how the Rec Department's doing and the plans for the future, kind of coincidentally, thinking about 5-10-year plans. I just wanted to see what his ideas were for the Rec Department over the next 5 to 10 years. So with that in mind, and with the Marsh Park survey, I wanted to try to schedule a Parks Committee meeting for next Wednesday. I know that the DAI committee is meeting there. This would be after that at 7. That is Wednesday the 5th, around 7 or 7:30. Yay, nay, middling.
What date is that?
That is Wednesday the 5th at 7, let's say. Good, cool, great. I'm going to pencil that in. I'll let Mr. Gabbard know that he's good to go. He said that was a good day for him. Okay, other stuff. We've got a couple more trees that Keep Norwood Cool is planting, either on Friday or Saturday. Kind of depends on the weather. So Dana Bull is going to make a Facebook event with that. I'm going to go out and dig the hole myself because sometimes manual labor feels really nice at the end of a long, frustrating week at work. So if you want to come to the Pocket Park at Ellesmere, or I think it's Beach and Robertson, we're planting 2 more trees. It's going to be nice. Just roll it in. I'll have the hole dug. Hopefully it'll be the right size. And have some beautiful trees for future generations. Last thing I want to talk about is the streets. We had a request to address council, which I guess that person did not appear, but I heard about it through Mr. Zimmerman, where there's issues, as always, with potholes in the city, and especially this year. So I wanted to explain a little bit about some of the difficulties that Public Works has been having with filling potholes. So for these potholes, they've been using cold mix, which is not ideal. It tends to crumble fairly quickly. Hot mix is the best way to more permanently seal potholes, but the plant that we used to use is on the location of now the Bengals training grounds. So that plant was no longer able to be used. I'm not saying Joe Burrow was to blame, but if he wanted to give us a couple $1 million, I would not say no. Or any other Bengal. I'm not picky. Because of that, there's been an inability of the city to get hot mix at a rate that is not double what we normally pay, because the other plants that make it are much further away from the city. And transporting it means you have to keep it hot, because it's hot mix, and it presents difficulties when you don't have the capacity to do that. But good news, there is a new plant that's opening on Mostella Road by the end of the week. So, starting hopefully next week, those potholes that have appeared and have not been filled will start to be filled again. Typically, Clint said that we would have already sealed or filled quite a few potholes, and that has not happened, but that will be happening very, very shortly. So, not going to seal, or not going to fill all the potholes in a day, but hopefully pretty soon there will be significantly fewer. Piggybacking onto that, sorry, I know it's late, but I am planning to have a bit of community outreach about infrastructure issues, streets, how we decide which streets are paved, kind of the overall, looking back at why our streets, in such need of deferred maintenance happening right now. I've been talking to Noah about this. I'm going to have this kind of outreach community thing, I don't know what to call it yet, on April 8th in the afternoon. That's a Saturday. It'll be either at the community center or the rec center. Just invite residents in to listen to hey, this is the process by which we decide which streets are paved. Here's some of the realities we're dealing with. Here's how much it actually costs to repave these streets, because I think people have an idea that it's a lot cheaper than it is. And I just want to share more broadly some of the good stuff that's coming up, some of the good infrastructure, like the repaving of Montgomery Road and Smith Road that are coming up very, very soon. So that'll be April 8th, I think at 2 p.m. There will be childcare provided for those that want to come with children. I wanted to do it on a weekend because I know for some people evenings are tough, especially if they have kids in school, and I felt this might be the best way to try to reach more different people. I'll make an event on Facebook as well, since that's the primary way a lot of people get their events. That's it. Sorry. I'm done.
Thank you, Mrs. Franson. Anyone else? Mrs. Winbauer.
I'd like to put coyote discussion on housing and public safety meeting. I had some residents reach out just concerning higher activity levels. So I just wanted to discuss education materials on what residents can do to prevent, also just what other cities are doing legislation-wise and preventative-wise with coyotes coming into more urban settings. So could get that on the agenda, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mrs. Winbauer. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I'd like to add the creation of a non-discrimination ordinance to the law committee.
Thank you, sir.
Pardon me, Mr. Thompson, can you give me your exact wording again? Non-discrimination?
A non-discrimination ordinance.
Ordinance, thank you.
Anyone else? Then we don't have any communications this evening. All members are present, so we'll go to adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment? Mrs. Franzen.
I motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen, Ms. Royce.
Second.
Second by Ms. Royce. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Mr. Braden?
Sure.
You can stay.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. We're adjourned.
Will all the council members have